Hello everyone, how are we all doing?
Hi Mark.
Have we all come to an excellent mingling tonight?
Yes, I thought so.
Right, apparently I have to wait for a bit for someone to come out of that door, so does anyone have any good jokes we can tell? I'll wait for that to happen. Oh wait, you're not a comedian, go on. No, I'm only messing.
I could tell a Rick Mail joke.
Please.
Okay, but this doesn't really work because I'm telling it, but what did the man with the 12-inch cock have for breakfast?
Didn't realise it was like kind of events.
This morning I had a boiled egg. But it doesn't work because I'm a lady.
Start the music on. You're good, very good. Fantastic.
You didn't tell a joke?
Didn't have 2 minutes. Right. So this is going to be our panel discussion about all things AI. How do we use it? What tools do we use? How do we feel about Google? And is it going to be part of our imminent doom? So I thought I'd better introduce the panelists first. So on my left we have Katie Thompson, who is freelance copywriter at Katie Lingo. Then you've got Alex Cassidy, who is head of digital PR at Distinctly. Stevie, who's SEO and content manager at Gumpo. And then finally you've got Dan Wiggins, who is the founder and director of Redcore Digital. And because I don't want to read a big blurb about what they do, I'm going to pass the mic over to them and let them say a little bit more about that.
Sorry for saying cock, I was talking about chickens. Hi, my name's Katie, and yes, as Tim said, I do some stand-up comedy on the side, but I'll try and be very serious this evening. I run Katie Lingo, so we work with agencies who outsource their content marketing needs to us, just me and my husband. So yes, tell some silly jokes, run marathons, dawn, we must compare notes. And yeah, and hold microphones, so here you go.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, I'm Alex, head of digital PR at Distinctly. Been working in digital PR for around nearly 10 years. Started out at MerseySearch, then worked in-house at RDU briefly, and now, yeah, head up team at Stevie.
Hi, I'm Stevie. I will make no promises to be serious. I am a little bit of a jack of all trades, and I've got a small agency in Macclesfield, so I do a little bit of everything.
Hi guys, I'm Dan from Redcore. So I've worked in-house, worked at agency side, and then about 3 years ago decided to start scaling an agency myself. So we're only a small agency, local based, and we offer SEO, paid media, content and web management. So.
I'm going to let you hold on to that mic because I feel like, can everyone just hear me like project?
Yes.
Smashing. Classically trained. So I'm going to ask this first question to the room, and I'd like to see a show of hands. And I'll let the panel play along as well. Who here thinks AI is going to be a net positive for their job? Okay. And who thinks it's going to be a net negative? About 60-40 for the positives, to be fair. We've got a room of optimists, which is nice. So, Dan, you've got the mic now, so I'll let you go first. How has AI impacted your work over the last 2 years, and what things do you do differently now?
I think we still focus most of our time on the foundational aspects we have been doing for especially Redcore for the last 5 years, making sure that content on site is written well, human written content. We still don't generate AI content en masse, and we don't sell that to our clients. It's never been a focus of ours, until AI gets better in LLMs, it's never going to be. I think the biggest thing that we use AI for at the moment is to increase our productivity, so it's internal systems and procedures. And I think, again, until we see a drastic increase in the quality that is generated by AI, then we're in no rush to start sending that work out to our clients.
I'm going to ask the question to everyone on that panel just because I think it's really interesting about sort of how each sort of discipline has sort of evolved over the last 2 years. So, Stevie, your thoughts?
Honestly, it's pretty much the same. We don't use it to generate content, but I think it helps with just getting the ball rolling a lot. So idea generation, but not using those ideas, just kind of getting your brain thinking about it. So kind of as a brainstorming tool, or using it to kind of sense check things where you're like, am I right? Or you really just want someone to say, yes, you are. That's kind of how we tend to use it.
Yeah, the reason why I think it's going to be negative in that sense is linked to what you were saying, where we don't use it because we don't think it's very good still. But I don't think that stops everybody from just using it, even though it's poor. So I think overall, my little part of the industry, which is digital PR, will get worse because the well will get poisoned by people just using it to still achieve the same results in some cases. But I think it will be just a poor iteration of it, which over time will just continue to happen. So we don't use it for the same reasons these guys don't, because it's not quite there yet and still needs time. But yeah, whether or not that will happen remains to be seen. But some people definitely do and are. So yeah.
Yeah, obviously as a content writer, not using generative AI at all, I've obviously played with it, but I think how it's impacted us most is the kind of briefs that come to us now. So it could be that someone's used it and maybe regretted it and come to us and asked us to finesse it or put it in their tone of voice, or it could be the conversations we have with clients now are very different. It's a case of what is your AI policy? They actually expect you to have one. Or is it absolutely not AI, or will they use a content checker as well, things like that. So it's impacting the relationship with our clients, I would say most, but I wouldn't say it's taking on work or anything.
So does anyone on the panel use an AI tool, like a specific AI tool, as opposed to ChatGPT to do the work that they need to do?
We use ChatGPT. We use ChatGPT. We spent about a year and a half testing ChatGPT specifically to see which functions it could use within our team. So we had like an AI task force, about 3 or 4 people, whose job it was to just test it on every stage of our process. And the one thing that we found it could replace right now was subject line writing or headline writing for me pitch emails. And I think some of the team also use it for, the problem is that as a head of the team, I don't necessarily do a lot of the work in the same way anymore. I don't do billable work like I used to. So we're sort of relying on the team testing it, we're doing billable work. The hard thing about that is that it probably takes them twice as long to learn how to do the thing using AI, and we're like, well, we're at capacity, so we need them to be doing work now. But they have found it's been able to replace a lot of the email editing as well, that they do. So they're the 2 things that we have used it for and have tested on a lot of other bits and pieces. And that's just ChatGPT.
Fair enough. Anyone else? No good? No else? How does the panel feel about the whole AI mode thing, which is now obviously getting shut down our throats a little bit by Google? So like, even if you don't want it, you've got it.
I think for us at the minute, obviously, everything we do is client-facing, and we receive a budget from the client, and the client is expected to receive a return on investment for that budget spent with us. Now, for us, if we are looking at what we can get most bang for their buck, it isn't to spend time on optimising for LLM results when there's such a low market share. I think realistically, we can't expect the client to pay us, X amount a month, and for us to then turn around and say, great, you generate 1,000 sessions to your website through LLM referrals, and that generated, X revenue for your business. When they can generate 10 times as much, or almost said before, 373 times as much through Google. I think we need to focus our efforts on what the dominant market share is still. So I think we're a long way off before we have to worry about it. Also, as Dawn mentioned before, the computation expense of AI mode and generative search itself, it's going to be a long time before we see AI mode replacing traditional lexical search. I think realistically, we are years off before AI is the default go-to. People still use traditional search to find their products, to find their answers, and to find their information.
If my understanding of AI mode is right, as far as it's being rolled, it hasn't been rolled out over here yet, Dawn, looking at you specifically, if the results we're going to start getting, and this is based on various stuff we've read about it, are sort of tailored to our personal profile on Google. So, for example, showing restaurants in the area, and like Italian food and stuff like that. I think, on the one hand, it's great that Google is fulfilling its role in helping us get the answers as quickly as possible, but it worries me, and this is me kind of catastrophizing, that everything is through kind of our lens. What are the implications for that in terms of politics or propaganda or things like that? And we've already seen it with misinformation and stuff like that, which I know we're coming to. So sometimes I question: does every search that you put into Google, does it have to be about you? If I want to know the capital of Latvia, yeah, but don't go to Riga. to read Wisdom. Go to Oslo, you know, I question if it's necessary.
On that, the privacy thing is something that I think about a lot. Google is notorious for being terrible with privacy, and if you're increasing personalization, you're going to lose that privacy even more. Not that it's been a thing for 10 years, but I think a lot of people still believe in privacy, and it getting continually taken away is something to be aware of, but not concerned about.
So what are the panel thoughts on, obviously, Katie's just alluded to it there, generative AI and its contribution to misinformation?
I thought the microphone. So it is obviously the percentage of which it's hallucinating is really, and the key thing about it is to search a subject which you actually know something about, to see it, and then you'll be able to identify where it's wrong on, because it's really easy to just assume that Google is correct because of how conditioned we are to think that is the case based off of just society telling us that, right, and just sort of use and being users. But when you start to search on topics you actually understand and know, you realise where the issues are. And then when you extrapolate that out to, well, I assume that's probably the case then for topics that I don't know anything about, and I can't trust this firsthand, and that's worrying. But I do think that a lot of it still is just regurgitating Wikipedia, but it's about when it merges things. You can see where it's got its sources from, and it's taken 2 or 3 sources. So I've searched stuff like, I've been on a train, there's delays. Why is there a delay on this Southwest train? And it's taken a tweet from 2021 and been like, well, this is why, which is mad. But I've also seen anecdotally in the world people saying they don't trust it, and just from people that you know saying things. So I think it will just ruin their reputation long term, most likely.
You go.
Yeah, I think as well, when it comes to the output of generative search and LLM specifically, from my perspective, I think the issue that we're seeing is people are awful at communicating to human. So when they're now trying to put their prompts into ChatGPT, they're bad enough to try and explain to someone they work with what they want to outcome on the project. All of a sudden, they're now going to try and explain it into a prompt. And then ChatGPT or LLMs give you an output, and people just take that for verbatim and then just run with it. And that's where we're seeing an increase in just crap content and just LLM splurge. And I just think if people need to, if people nail the prompts, I think a lot of the time we talk about the issues with AI, the issues with generation. A lot of the time it's issues with people using the tools. The tools themselves are innately brilliant. Like, we can't deny how fantastic they are. It's the users that need more work.
Yeah, on that, the misinformation side of it, I think, is mainly coming from users using it really poorly, and people, like putting the Pope in a nice puffer jacket. Like these are how people are going to use it, because people are always going to abuse tools before they use them. And I think that's kind of more where the misinformation is the problem, less so what it's spitting out and more how people are using it.
And also SEOs.
In particular,
because I've already seen so many examples of people being like, here's how you can fully manipulate an AI overview for your company, and that's our job to a certain extent. But there is a responsibility there to try to. Is there? I don't know. But there is a responsibility to try to not do that. But I've already seen people jailbreaking it in that sense, so it's kind of interesting to see. We are responsible for that as well.
It's the same black hat tactics before, just in a different font.
Yeah, you're right, it's absolutely our responsibility as publishers as well, to make sure that what we're putting out there is fact-checked and everything else. Because, like you say, users are kind of biased and lazy, and you said earlier about reducing the burden of search. I think we've seen this information every day, where there's a difference between disinformation and misinformation. Disinformation is obviously malicious. But I see it play out. I'm just going to give you a quick example about my mother, right? She has a filter bubble. The other day she puts on a WhatsApp group, sex offenders to get chemical castration. Right? There's a point to this. I googled it. Most of the news sites were considering it could happen, but the Daily Express said to get it, and she took it as gospel, and she told 12 people. Right? Now if you imagine an AI could put out something wrong or hallucinate something at scale, and someone's already biased and searching through AI mode as well, even more bias, what the ramifications are, again, catastrophizing, but it's scary to see it on a small scale to think how this can influence wars or the health division, things like that.
Yeah, and stripping stuff from its context, because you've got that April Fool's articles that go on newspapers all the time.
Satire, yeah.
And that's funny. But when it's in the context of the newspaper, you know it's a joke. But when it's taken out of it, it's just made out of you. It's clearly, it's actually hard not to tell, especially if like you're not a digital native or.
Yeah.
I think it's terrifying that AI is learning from reading things on the Daily Star and the Daily Express.
Yeah.
Because it's just stripped of all sorts of context.
It's Meghan Markle's fault.
Yeah, it does not like Meghan Markle, that mobile, let me tell you. So, does anyone have sort of any internal policies? I know some people work for themselves, that's maybe a bit too grandiose a term, but do you sort of think about your ethics when using AI in your marketing work?
We have an AI policy, not necessarily for the purpose of ethics, but because of the fact that we knew the team members would be using it. So it felt, I didn't want them to feel like it had to be cloak and dagger to do it that way, because it's easier than you can teach them, like you say, you can teach them how to prompt that or do those things, at least it's having a conversation about it, rather than the junior person coming in and thinking they weren't supposed to use ChatGPT, so they have to do it secretly. And we have paid accounts for everybody as well, so that they can be more effective. And so I wouldn't say just from an ethics perspective, but more just from practicality.
Can I swear? Something like that. I put out on LinkedIn.
We've all heard your joke, Katie.
Talk between friends. When people first started, I put out a LinkedIn post and said, "What is our AI policy?" It's simple, we don't fucking use it. But now, because the nature of it has changed our kind of relationship with clients, people do ask that, and so I think our policy would be, we don't use it, but however, if you're going to give me content that's been generated by it and you want us to change it, you have to have that final sign-off. The kind of the burden has to be on them because they are the publisher. In the same sense of like journalism editors, to make sure that we aren't in trouble if they publish something that's been hallucinated.
So, where do you draw the line between using ChatGPT for like helpful automation in your job and a genuine like loss of creativity because you're using it to produce content effectively because you can do it at scale and cheaply?
I think the way I see it, a lot of people use AI in one particular order. So you mentioned before, you use it for like ideation, content guidelines and sort of summaries, and then you can base it from that and then run it yourself and come up with better ideas and expand upon it. We quite like to do it the opposite way around. So we'd always start with the human critical thinking, come up with the ideas ourselves based on questions and answers we've had from our clients when we're doing consumer profiles and whatnot and trying to build that ICP with our clients. We then start the ideation ourselves, and then we can take it through ChatGPT. Maybe have we missed anything through this sort of, this is what we've got so far, can you expand on it? Is there anything I can suggest that maybe you should write this about this topic and not covered at our starting point? And then always from that to the human, final pass is always human led as well. Rather than the other way around. I think, as I said before, people start with the AI creation and then try and humanize the content. I think it should be the other way around. Start with the human and then you can always put the AI into it to mop it up and tidy it up slightly afterwards.
And just on that as well, one of the things we found with the creativity particularly was that I don't think can't make it work fun necessarily in some ways, but there is certainly a craft that can go into the doing of the job, and I think it can be very unsatisfying if at the end of it you haven't really had much input on so our job is to get links and get coverage, and I think that if you have a digital PR person who has come up with an idea, really written a press release, iterated it a few times and then got that result, versus if they have exported all of it to ChatGPT except for the fundamental parts that currently can't be exported. I just think that at some point they're going to leave that job sooner rather than later because it's just there's no innate reward to it, which outside of the money, fine. But I think we need something a little bit more for that. There to be a satisfying end to the task you're doing. We've noticed that when we've explored certain parts of it too. Like we have a team who just send emails, we wouldn't write press release. We've done that historically, and it was never as satisfying for them to get the result because they hadn't really had an input on the beginning stage. So I think that's also a consideration that you do lose something in that process at the end result as well as the actual journey.
Does anyone on the panel have any thoughts about the environmental impact of AI? Does this affect the way you use it? Do you use it at all?
I mean, I talked before, and obviously the one's already talked about the computation cost of generative search and its impact on the environment. I mean, I don't have any stats to hand or off the top of my head, but like I said, I mentioned before, I do think we are a long time off it becoming the primary go-to source of information, purely because of the cost that businesses are feeling now to generate those searches, and also the carbon footprint that it does impact when you are using all these massive CPUs to generate AI responses for certain searches.
Yeah, I also think that people don't. I think you're going to have a tough time selling another thing that is like a climate issue to people as a reason why not to do something, because already there's things which, once you start putting the thread of clients that you have and your day-to-day life, what you do, the environmental cover that you have is already pretty disastrous. If you go on holiday, if you go on like a longer flight. So I think people just don't want to hear that, and you're going to have a better chance of trying to educate people on the dangers of AI without going to the climate route. Because it's just going to be another one of the laundry list of things that you shouldn't do because it's bad for the environment. Whereas if you go for like the route on ethics from a Stevie Creative's perspective, I think that's going to be a lot more effective to getting into people's ear about whether this is a problem.
Yeah, exactly. Like you say, you could take that route and kind of scare them, but realistically, I think we've all got that stat in our head. Is it like one ChatGPT request is one Evian bottle of water or whatever? I think we're all kind of aware of that, but at the same time, if I do a ChatGPT request and I think, well, what's that Instagram story uploaded? How many bottles of water is that? And stuff like that, or cryptocurrency or data centers or whatever like that. So I think we need to think, what is the trade-off? Are we using AI for healthcare? Are we using it to better the world? Is it worth the environmental trade-off? And probably not.
So do you think users understand how their data is being used by AI when it comes to marketing?
Oh, you love that one.
No, they don't know anything. I think some people are a little bit aware that that their data is being used, but I don't think that anyone, like a layman, let's say, because I think we all know, because we work in it. But I think most people still think that there's like a lot of privacy that goes on. Like, I know that my mom just does not have any idea about her privacy in any way, shape, or form. She's like, what are you talking about? Yeah, this search I did is completely private. It's like, no, 70 words. So I think that there's like a big problem with how our data will be used. And I think that there's a lot of implications for it in the future, especially as things get more personalized, and especially as kind of like the things that we do aren't able to be as curated by us, if that makes sense. So I think all of the curation is now being done for us rather than us doing the curation, and that kind of data privacy is going to have a big impact, if that makes any sense.
I think perhaps possibly the onus is on us as digital marketers to kind of communicate or make people aware of exactly how their data is being used. I think, has anyone seen that art installation? I think it was all the terms and conditions for each of the social media. Have you seen this? And it's like a big bar chart and it goes all the way down the wall because the terms and conditions are so long. There are little things in the mainstream, like you go into your Google and see what Google knows about you and turn it off and stuff like that. I think it's perhaps on us to make sure the layman understands that. 9 times out of 10 it's probably just so they can see who sell us has. But I would feel better if I didn't know anything about it, knowing that I know how my data's being used.
So I'll just finish on one final question, and I'll give a bit of a sort of anecdote for myself. What do you think in the next sort of year is the biggest challenge you have to overcome within your sort of sector of the industry to do with AI? Now, for myself in digital PR, a big problem that we have at the minute is that so many people are trying to use AI to come up with these fake experts. The journalists will now demand to speak to your source face to face because they just think everything is AI now. They just don't want to touch you with a barge pole unless you are willing to talk to them on video, which is probably fair enough. So does everyone have any problems like that you've got coming?
I think something people talking about is just like the chatter around it. I mean, a lot of conversations you have with clients will be potentially, like you were saying, they're going to want to maybe focus on something because it's new and shiny. And I think that's the other issue as well with digital PR is that there's a risk to publishers with this, right? With what's happening, there's journalist layoffs and things like that. And sometimes I don't think we recognise enough that a strong, robust media is so crucial for our industry specifically, and we should really try to champion that as much as possible because we really rely on it as much as they can rely on us in some ways. So the worry I have is that it could affect the ecosystem generally of press and media, which has a knock-on effect on digital PR. And I don't think people realise that. It's a bit of a worry of mine.
Yeah, 2 points and one more anecdotal as well. So we worked with a client recently. We wrote some content for a new website, and rather than giving us feedback on the content that we created, they just took the content and ran it through ChatGPT and made a bunch of edits and then sent it back to us. And it's like, you don't realise how much more work you've just made us now have to sort of commit to. And also as well, I think there's a very dangerous trend at the moment where people who are generating great content are using certain patterns that are created by LLMs, and their work is being scrutinised and being almost accused of, you just use ChatGPT for this. And it's like, people have been using EM dashes for years. Just let it go. Like, did you enjoy the post? Did you get something useful from the piece of content? If so, then my argument is, does it really matter if it was AI generated or not? Someone had to prompt that post, someone had to prompt that piece of content. So if that's someone's genuine thought and the outcome of it was a useful piece of content that you enjoyed, you read, you've liked and now you've engaged on, then I think the person who wrote that post is, and you don't.
Yeah, I guess the challenge will be, certainly for content writers, is kind of reinforcing the value of, like you said, going to first-hand sources and actually speaking to an expert when it's easy to say, well, just get an AI to do it. And trying to do that without scaremongering, without saying, well, it could be publishing hallucinations or probably misinformations for that. So I think some of us might have seen that Brighton SEO talk, that very controversial one. Yeah, I don't need to say any more. Yeah, if we could avoid all of that, that would be great. So luckily people like you and us both fighting a good fight, aren't we? Yeah.
Try our best. Are we all happy with that? I thought that was a really good panel discussion. Can we have a big round of applause for our panelists, please? And one big round of applause for our 3 event organisers, Nat, Laura and Tom.